Okay, welcome in the audience. Welcome very, very much to Conversation. It gets to Conversation, Nat Wood. And Nat Wood is now producing his own program, 30 Frames a Second, which he's done over a long period of time here at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And he's also been a prodigious helper of others, not the least of which is Miss Rice.
Yeah.
He's been producing her program, and she is without a doubt a certified angel in the world. And I think she's up 92 or something.
92.
Still fighting the good fight for the tenants and that sort of thing. Also community cop and others you were helping. And you used to do really good programs, really good framing, good television, good camera with street scenes that are going on. And now you're doing your own show, which is being aired every Tuesday at 2 o'clock.
Right.
An hour-long call-in show. And you are really developing that show into a really important program for which I thank you very much. You are and have the way about you being yourself in front of with responsibility for it. You're what my daddy would have called a class act on television.
Thank you, Harold.
And I congratulate you very much on that, particularly on that, how well you're handling yourself with a lot of different kinds of issues that you get into on that program. And so it's so good to have you on the program. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Harold.
We were just chatting. We're in public access. Public access is part of communication, multimedia communication, that is below the radar of what they call the established media in a certain sense. We have even public television and NBC and the established networks from the past and everything is what they call the established media. And then there is below that, we have alternative television that's developing. We have a star, Amy Goodman, who has emerged out of the pack, as it were, of people who might take exception to the take that the established media and the establishment, perhaps, national and world, might have in terms of what is legitimately able to get out to the public. And it's very, very important. But we're here within public access, and I know you've been singing the praises of public access structurally, where it represents, where it fits into the society. And maybe we could pick it up there. You've been over here at MNN since about 95, you said.
Exactly.
Maybe
95.
We could pick it up then. How did you get in touch with it? And let's talk some about media, multimedia. Where is it going now with the exponential increasing of capability that the computer is delivering down on us, whether we want it or not? It's just opening up all kinds of possibilities. But tell us, you came over in 95. Could you share a little of that? What drew you to MNN? How did you get here? And explain yourself a little bit.
Purely by accident. It was serendipitous. I was a single father, urban father.
And grandfather.
Well, I wasn't in 95.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But thank you for that. Bless you for that. Yeah, that would make my grandchildren 27, 28, 30 years old.
Yeah.
And,
okay, right. Let's keep that
I have the capacity, but I just didn't,
That's a very interesting theme. I watched your thing on television last night. Did you happen to see public television last night? I was just chatting with John Simon. They had 3 hours on the evolution of humanity.
Wow.
Nova. Really well done.
Nova
it was really good. And it was interesting because Homo sapien were all African.
Right.
And it was really interesting that they had Australopithecine 4 million years ago.
All your stuff,
and Homo sapien, our species, was contained within Australopithecine, precursor up the hominoid line to what was to become us. So the reality is not only at the moment, there's also a potentiality in the reality that sometimes doesn't get noticed because it's potentiality rather than linking to what's been before. If you can understand what I'm saying, it may have meaning politically and socially.
It has tremendous meaning. Even in the sense of vision, it takes a while for people to understand the truth. Just because you come out with a fact, a truth, does not necessarily mean that the masses of people are ready to accept that truth.
I think that's without a doubt that's been that way. We do have to anchor to history.
Correct. Correct.
But we can't let history be the defeater of what the potentiality is in a new way. We may be at that moment now in the larger organizing of social, political, economic matters on this planet, even within a universal context, a context of universe.
See, we have so much potential. As remarkable as the world is that we've created, we use so little of our true potential, so little of our brain power, that our capacity is just unbelievable. So
Now,
there are, you know.
Let's not lose this in a way, because we're not only talking now about an individual or something,
Right.
but we're talking about each individual human being
Correct.
that has a capability that can't be. It's hard to realize your potential if you're starving or if you're being
That
oppressed.
is correct.
Or anything.
That
and
is
by
correct.
and large, for a lot of history, a lot of people have been terribly impressed. It was very hard for them to realize their full potential, but we have the capability of that now that perhaps historically we didn't have. We should be a little easy with those who are ensconced in historical patterns, which are being perhaps transcended.
Starvation is a byproduct of oppression.
Yeah.
There's really no reason for people to be starving other than oppression, because the world provides so much sustenance in so many different places that the basic reason for starvation and ignorance is that groups of people, for their own reasons, generally greed and power, reasons of greed and power,
Yeah.
oppress other people to keep them starving and to keep them ignorant. So it's
That's a
an
premise.
aggressive act.
That's
you know.
that's a very interesting premise.
Right.
It's very important,
Right.
and it's probably true that that's the way things have been done out of the past. But we have a newly emerging capability that perhaps was not characteristic of the overall system throughout all of history. In a sense, there's always been emperors in Rome, kings in England, slave
Correct.
masters in,
Correct.
and it was in a context of our relationship to the environment that axiomatically almost, there are more have-nots in terms of our overall capability technologically to provide life support through time. Would you think that that does make sense? There are more haves at the level of potentiality through time. If we move through the generation,
if you look at potentiality,
Yeah, that's
there are no have-nots.
Okay.
Potentially, there are no have-nots.
yeah. Has it always
Not
been,
having is it.
Has it always been like that, or were there times when there was
Well, no. I believe there was
worth
a
getting some
time.
grounding.
I believe there were times and circumstances when life was so difficult that it was incumbent upon people to have a certain degree of robustness and ingenuity to gather stuff, but that's basically not the case anymore.
And that thing, that thing, if I may, let's repair to it. Let's try to keep a big picture if we can. If we can, we'll get into public access and all whatnot, but everything. But it was really well done. It was really updated from what we have understood that. And there was a bottleneck in the evolutionary process in Africa, and from what they're able to come up with, and it's amazing. You have to, in a certain sense, trust a good deal of the scientific things that they're coming up with. But there was a bottleneck, and it was down to where what was to become Homo sapien, from which we are all descended, it was down to, they were measuring, was down to about 600 people that were just hanging on within an environment that was very challenging, and it made challenging a lot of climate change things that were going on. But it was a very touch-and-go kind of thing. And throughout most of history, and then we get to civilization, and you get power structures, and the assumption that there's not enough is built in to virtually all of our perceived notions of the reality in which humanity affairs are being carried out. Scarcity economics is the allocation of scarce resources. There's not enough. That was the assumption. And was there some reality that relative to what the trend was through history, where we're getting more and more able to provide better living standards?
But that was never the case that there wasn't enough.
You don't think so?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay,
There's an ocean full of fish there. I mean,
Right. Okay, that's good. Yeah, talk that way. Yeah,
I mean,
right.
there are forests and jungles, and there's ample wood. There's so much stuff to build and sustain yourself that it was never a case that there wasn't enough. Again, we pay our farmers not to grow food so that we can control the prices of food.
Got to keep that price
Correct.
stabilization. Yeah, the economic demands.
We privatize people's water.
Yeah,
the water of different countries, so we can control this thing. It's not because there's not enough food. It's not because there's not enough land. It's not because there's not enough water, and it's certainly not because we don't have the ingenuity and the stick-to-itiveness to produce stuff. I mean, not only can we produce what is available, we have grown so much scientifically that we can dupe what we produce. We can clone what we produce. We can do all sorts of things. So it's more than enough
in this time.
Correct.
But there is progress being made in the percentage, like the percentage of people. How you measure that? The percentage of people that could be seen to be have. It was a little difficult for the people when the Black Plague hit in the 13th century in Europe. They had no knowledge of how to combat it. They had no knowledge of what, or if you're taking it against an understanding not only of food and shelter and things you need to live and everything like that, to live out a full biography, much less potentiality. But there was a lack of understanding of the reality. There was a lack of understanding. Now, every day there comes a revolution in over the transom, at this time like a firecracker going on, in terms of this moment.
Right.
And that there are a higher percentage of the world population could be seen to be haves through time. I would submit in terms of the technological extension of our capability.
What?
Haves, it calls for a definition of terms. How would you define a have? How do you define somebody that's a have?
We have come to a place, especially in the United States, especially in this
Let's
time.
keep it in the world. Let's keep it in the universe
well,
if we can.
In the world, it's different. It's different. Have is location.
Yeah.
It's specific to your circumstance and your perception.
Okay. But also your technological capability to have that program came out to a whole bunch of people. Couldn't have done it in 1920. You didn't have the means of extending knowledge. Yeah?
You are looking at other people's condition through your perspective.
Yeah, I suppose.
And you are defining haves and have-nots by your perspective.
How do we define a have in terms of that? If you think in terms of a have as somebody who's realizing their full potential, that's a quality of it.
Not everybody wants to or has the capacity to realize their full potential. In point of fact, only a few people actually think of it as some sort of priority. I think we're like a few of those people who are always like pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
There's the vast majority of people, I really believe, just want a comfortable existence. That is generally provided by those people who push the envelope. So you have to define have and have not by a person's own. What you think is reality is reality.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute. If you you just think with Reverend Ike,
Representative.
Yes, that was a great program. Reverend Ike, you say,
well, his successor, Reverend Ike.
Or you could go to who said think positive. Who was that guy? I forget. Who used to do that and everything like that. You think positive. But I mean,
see, that's the problem. That's what has brought us into the predicament that we have.
Okay.
This arrogance, and it's a Eurocentric arrogance
for the last 500 years, for sure.
For the most part, but it is an arrogance basically of power. You know, it's not necessarily just confined to Eurocentric thinking, but the whole definition of race, of coming over to another land, of not just taking their resources, but actually thinking
their
of yourself
identity
as superior to them because you have, you've come up with a musket. That makes you better than. It's
true when you think about it. If you win in a military situation, you are literally above the law.
Correct.
The law is for the winners.
Correct.
Right? So you have few winners, and the winners then rule over the others, and that's the history of the world.
That's why we can. That's why we can tell the UN what to do and not pay them any money.
Yeah.
You know.
Or the wealthy can roam. Rome ruled for 1,000 years, and they were able to conquer other peoples and steal the grain from them. And Da Vinci was a favorite of the Medicis because he made a siege machine, not because he painted the Sistine Chapel. Right. That gave an advantage.
And the Renaissance was actually defined, even though it was defined predominantly in Europe and Italy, and but it was basically defined by Christopher Columbus's conquest of North America, of the
North
New
and
World.
South America,
North
European,
and South, the Americas.
But in this, they were talking about the evolution of the species. Now here, I wonder if we can get out to species consciousness or something like that, or there's something going in whether or not there's any purpose to it all. What's it all about? That kind of thing. Are we at a time? We did a program a little while ago, Nat, and this is all wanting to be defined net neutrality. Everybody have an ability to have their idea communicated within the system of consciousness raising, including the right-wing people or whoever. They've got more power because they got more money. They can buy time. They can influence people's consciousness and that sort of thing. We're getting to a point where
mind control, for lack of a
mind
better term.
control. Vance Packard wrote The Hidden Persuaders.
Or at the very least, a very sophisticated form of programming.
Yeah, that's right.
We think of television program. Tony Riddle said this to me one time.
Way back. He used to be our exec.
Right, and it's true. When you think of television programming, you think of the Harold Channer Show as a television program.
Well,
but it's not the television thing that's being programmed. It's you, the viewer, who's being programmed.
Marshall McLuhan wrote about that. You know who else really read that well was James Joyce. He was really good. But the thing is, we did a program, and I'm just trying to keep it on a large view, if I can, and then we'll get into the details, because I really think you and I both believe very much in the mission and the uniqueness of public access as an institutional structure. There's 3,000 of these across the country, and you produce it in a way that's kind of unique. And it's within a world that's leading toward the concept of net neutrality, communication neutrality, voices that are overridden by the power of the inherited systems and so forth, are maybe able to go and find a niche that they haven't been able to. So that's enlightening in a certain sense of different truths.
I actually think that people like you and Miss Rice, to a lesser extent, people like me, because I came in so much later, and the train was actually running by the time I got in. There was potential to be seen.
Yeah, but you're in link with that younger, newer thing coming along
that
too,
is
and
correct.
that's what's
that
got
is
to
correct.
be. You can't. You got to keep track of all of it.
But when you and Miss people like you, especially you and Miss Rice came in, it was all fresh and new. I mean, it was pioneer territory. And you blazed out a path that very few blazed out and even associated public access with. You brought in intellectuals, you brought in economists. I mean, you actually contributed to a specific need, not just a niche, but a need for knowledge and understanding on a worldview to the public. For the most part, public access, when you came in, was like people dressed up as vampires, Well,
there's a lot of that.
It was goofball television. It was goofball television. And I know you, Harold. You're as nutty as the rest of us. You have a tremendous sense of humor. But you did bring in people like Bucky Fuller
Now Bucky Fuller is a sacred name in my book. He's about the best mind that ever came down the pike, in my humble opinion.
But you sought that out. You sought that out.
Yeah.
So when people like me came in, I already saw the potential of it. The potential had not reached fruition, and I think I like upped the ante. In the people that we subsequently brought in. But it wasn't as difficult because I wasn't like inventing the wheel. I was just like seeing the potential of the wheel. Jobs, I can make a bike. But you actually invented the wheel.
Well, it was coming willy-nilly. It was coming from the extensions of our consciousness. It was that we're able to extend. We're a unique species down to 600 back, and it's out of Africa, and we were a unique species. And how did the evolutionary process, what does it mean that the evolutionary process is occurring in this universe? And that we got to that, and you could go into a large, without going into the details. 3.8 billion years ago, there was nothing but inorganic matter in this universe, or in this planet. 4.5 billion years ago. Well, apparently, from Big Bang, they say 13.8 billion years ago is when this universe got started. And I saw DeGrasse Tyson on television the other night. He and I was also very disappointed at that accelerator. The one in CERN, where there's so much going on in there. They were going to have a telescope array that's been cut because of the debt limit baloney coming out of this Tea Party stuff. We can get to the Tea Party and the thing.
I'd love to get
and
to
the
that,
assault upon knowledge, and the assault upon progress, and the assault upon the political spectrum of the world right now, based upon
the assault upon a black man in the president's seat who does not have the capacity to take a baseball bat to these fools' knees, and they are fully prepared to destroy themselves and the economy of the American people
in order to try and get
rid of this guy.
I wanted to ask about that. I'll get back to the universe.
It's a suicide solution that is beyond belief.
Tyson was on Mars the other day.
I saw that.
And he says they didn't put the telescope array. They could have gotten a picture. We've had a picture of the shock wave of the beginning.
Well, Bill Maher will
he's a piece of work.
But he will say the truth. I don't think Tyson wants to say the truth. I think Tyson is reluctant to play the race card because he's black, where Bill Maher will just tell the truth. But the bottom line is that they are willing to take us all down to get the Negro, and they have right.
Well, we had apartheid only a couple decades ago in this country.
But it just shows you how goofy they are, because it's a suicide solution. I could see it if
I'm afraid that's why
it's one thing for me to kill all of y'all. It's another thing for me to kill me too.
That's right. And your progeny and everything. That's why I'm sort of at a deep level, very, very existentially challenged by what's going on now, because there's all kinds of angst, deep angst around all the world.
See, you talked about programming. What we refer to as spin, and they spin things that are just so far-fetched that if you actually sit down and think about it, you'd realize how ridiculous it is. You know, they talk about taxing the rich and the super rich, and they refer to them, and I've heard it referred to on reputable financial stations like CNBC, that I really believe that was their job to educate the public as to be more financially responsible. But they have come up, I have heard people I respect, had respected tremendously, refer to the super rich as jobs creators. That is baloney. No human being creates jobs. Necessity creates jobs. And when the necessity is gone, so go the jobs. There is only one group that will employ people for the simple reason that people need jobs. That is the government itself. But the private sector only employs people based on need. And I don't care how rich you are gonna die. And big wheel will keep on turning. Forbes died, Howard Hughes died, Buffett will die, Gates will die, and it means nothing. It means nothing. Steve Jobs just left Apple. Apple will be fine. People, whether they be rich or poor, have a couple of things in common. They both will die, and they are both expendable. Human beings are not jobs creators. Necessity creates jobs.
Well, necessity is often called the mother of invention.
It is the mother of invention. If I need, it doesn't matter what I do with what you do with my taxes. If I have a clothing store, and I have a customer base that's in there 24 hours a day, and I need 5 people to fill those orders, I'm going to hire them. I don't care whether you cut my taxes or raise my taxes. I need these people in order to sell to the public. I go on the internet, I get twice as many people buying my product. I don't need anybody in the store. Guess what? I am making money hand over fist, but I no longer need those people in my store. They're gone. Again, what you do with my taxes is irrelevant. The private sector is profit-driven. Profit-driven. It's only
like a shark going through water. It's got to keep moving.
I don't even blame them for that.
But
what I'm saying is, if jobs is the issue, jobs for the American people, you can forget about getting it from the private sector. You can forget about it. And I get so sick of people who are multi-millionaires talking about the debt and what it's going to do to their grandchildren. And fool, you know, you're sitting over there with 50, 100, $1 million, $1 billion. If your grandchildren don't have a good life, the hell with them. The hell with them. Because there are a lot of people who are struggling to get their families from point A to point B. And right now, we have a serious, serious dilemma. It is nice to think about food, what I'm going to have in the refrigerator, what my grandchildren will have in the refrigerator. But right now, my children don't even have a refrigerator. So my grandchildren... That's a moot point.
And that's going on a world scale, too. There's a huge gap between the few. I showed you a graph on another program a few months ago. How concentrated the wealth of the world. It's all in the upper percent of the society, worldwide, every political entity everywhere. And the distribution of wealth is now, you called it to my attention on your program, is 20 times the net worth of... the whites have over blacks. 20 times. Okay? 18 times over Hispanics in this country. And so forth.
And that's not due to education or anything else, because most people are blue collar. Most people are not nuclear physicists or biochemists, or most people do blue collar jobs. Now I can understand a person who, and as a matter of fact, for those people who are infinitely prepared to do big things, competition doesn't faze them. Competition only phases those people who have jobs. Those are the only people who are scared of competition. Bill Gates ain't scared of me being in the hunt. Steve Jobs in the hunt.
In the hunt.
Right. He's not scared of me coming up with new technology. He's a smart guy. He's going to come up. Warren Buffett does not care if I'm trading stocks or what I get. He's in the competition. The only ones who would fear me are those people who just have jobs. They're coming and they're going to take our jobs. Like we have jobs that, and the only organization that will employ people just because people need to be employed would be the government.
Well, that's the only way they have, if you think about it. That's good. I just wanted to get that thing about Tyson in or something. They did not. They defunded that telescope array. That we have a picture of the shock wave of the Big Bang, just talking about the ability of consciousness that has become Homo sapien and is coming in, and we're learning more and more all the time. We have a picture of the shock wave from the Wilkinson, the WHAM, from 200,000 years after the occurrence of the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. This was going to give us a picture of the universe, this universe, within a nanosecond of its occurrence, 13.8 billion years. That's sort of a capstone ability of us to take the measure of things in terms of conscious understanding of the process. And it also introduces it, because now, I'll get away from this in a hurry, but Brian Greene and Kaku are coming up with string theory, and they're coming up with the idea that it's very possible, the mathematics of it, is knowledge coming. We're learning more.
That is correct.
And that it might well be that this universe is one of parallel universes connected by wormholes, and the mathematics holds up. So what that does is this a closed system, or is it an open system? It's got to be seen as synergetic. That is, the behavioral system's unpredicted by the sum of the parts, which means there are no absolutes
Right.
that you can refer to, whether it's God or whatever, that you can give some absolute meaning beyond that which is evolving in the evolutionary process.
Right.
And that's where we're at now. And you got this.
But when you're learning, you don't have to give absolutes because your mind is open. You are seeking information.
Right.
You are not just like giving people absolutes of things that you have no knowledge of.
No.
You are seeking information, and to cut that out in any form is a sin against. Is
back to public access,
correct,
maybe,
correct,
and
correct,
net neutrality, and getting different ideas out, and getting something out other than the established story or narrative.
Correct.
And it's very disquieting, and to me, way of thinking that we just had a hurricane.
Right.
Everybody got all loading up with food. Everybody's full of angst and whatnot. Because there's angst abroad in the world now of a very deep nature.
Right.
It looks like this thing from 2008 was not just some sort of a little thing, or there's all these things that are really challenging the system in a way. We may be heading, particularly with the Tea Party thing coming, and so forth, to might be a Great Depression.
I call it the social Tea Party because I think of it as just a bunch of crazy crackers.
Yeah,
like social tea
I think that's partly there.
They're just like loonies.
But what they've done is they've picked up on that angst and they've given it a narrative that seems to have political roots, political legs, as they say. They've picked that up. They've got this fellow, Rick Perry, is running. They say he's the presumed candidate on the Republican ticket. I mean, with all due respect, he seems not at all to be capable of understanding things in a way that the universe either now allows in a liberating way ability to us, or requires if we're not to really just go right off the deep end with the incredible technologically extended capability, which now on the destructive side contains weapon systems for the first time that are able to wipe out the entire species. This is getting serious.
But I mean,
and there's where is the vision coming out of the other side that can relate and tap into the narrative of the angst that is abroad in the world in terms of how are we going to set up an operating manual for Spaceship Earth that can be really liberating of the full potential of humanity in a way that is uniquely new now and is coming in. And that's something that worries me a great deal. I'm afraid we may be heading for a really disastrous kind of thing. I don't know. That's just a thought.
We think of.
Where's the vision
of war and peace as two completely different, as opposites? But they're really not. They're two wings of the same bird. And just like you have, and that's the problem. That's why the war concept is so prevalent. Is because they send out warriors for war.
Yeah.
And we send out pacifists for peace. We need warriors for peace. The Tea Party is prevalent primarily because Obama could not or would not articulate a position that was in the best interest of the American people.
I wonder if we should be so hard on Mr. Obama, or if we should be so hard. Well, perhaps so, because when he's coming along, I called you a class act. He certainly was in the campaign of 2008, a class act that was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
He was coming forth with some ideas, real change. We're going to do that. And then he came up again. It's hard to do it because you've inherited all these institutions, one of which is that the Congress of the United States can say absolutely no to everything in a partisan way and make it not possible for anything to be done that might be able to be done at one level. The other level is the intellectuals. The intellectuals have not come up with an alternative reading of things that can be a narrative that can be picked up on by what might be loosely called the progressive view of they're just maintaining, and it's important that we do. We don't want to have them, they're going to attack Social Security, Medicare, anything at all that helps the poor. They want to turn everything into a thing of bankers that are going to be able to be gaining all of the control over what little wealth there is in creation. Attack any place where anything is going to help the least advantaged people of the world. And they could set it up into a kind of situation like that. And we don't have an alternative that seems to be able. We're trying to fight, tread water to save Social Security. No tax revenue. It's off the table. Everything's off the table because we put trillions of dollars into bailing that whole system out in 2008. And I'd like to know something, Nat. You haven't. Let me just quit one more thing. Is how in the hell is it? You could do some research. You're smart. You could do. I'm trying to, but. Back in 1929, we had a terrible depression. We may be heading for another one worldwide, which would be disastrous. They say, and was it in 1932, 33, 34, were the people, the Republicans who caused the depression, caused the difficulty, well, in the modern experience, with everything being done with the swaps and derivatives and the bad banking and all these kind of Glass-Steagall overthrown, all this kind of stuff, caused it. Were they able in 1932 to blame Mr. Roosevelt for the depression that they had caused? How do they get away with saying it's all Obama's fault for this when he inherited this situation out of history and that? How do they get away with that now? The Tea Party and the Republican Party.
Is irrelevant.
Would you explain that to me?
Yes.
Or was it the same with Mr. Roosevelt in 33, 34?
No, it wasn't the same.
Okay, talk to me about that issue.
And the difference was Roosevelt himself. Roosevelt had the capacity to articulate his position to the masses of people that made it impossible for him to be ignored. Roosevelt had the same capacity to inspire people and get across his point of view dynamically that Winston Churchill had, that Adolf Hitler had. It is not enough to be right. It is not enough to be right. You have to be dynamic. You have to be able to get people to see your point of view. We're not just talking about numbers here. We're talking about human beings. A great writer is able to take words and make you see people in a personal sense. It really doesn't matter if he's the protagonist or the antagonist. He can humanize people that don't even exist. President Obama is a genius intellectually, but he is not a dynamic warrior for the people. He is too prone to compromise.
Well, go on.
He had everything in his favor.
Now,
he had everything in his favor. When they were arguing about the debt limit, President Obama was supposed to say, "Listen, I have 9.2% of all Americans out of work, and no jobs is coming back. And it doesn't matter whether it was president; those jobs are not coming back."
Wait a minute, that's a big thing, Mr. If I may. You got John Maynard Keynes, who set up the whole system in the Depression and into the First World War, and that he set up. It's called demand side. You got to have some demand. The people have to have the ability to buy whatever the market can produce. If you have supply and demand is going to work. He set it all up, and he said in a letter to his grandchildren, this is interesting to keep in mind, which Mr. Obama may be up against, or we might all be up against. He wrote in a letter to his grandchildren, that would be about now in their maturity, that you're going to be confronted with something that's very hard to understand, and it's going to be structurally induced, massive, technologically induced unemployment. That the ability to distribute buying power or income to the masses of the people, which have always worked by having people go in Ford factory out the farm, that kind of thing. It's not going to work in order to distribute demand, because the technology is going to become increasingly responsible for production apart from the labor input to production. He said that. That may be that's not just the bad thing it's structural. Also on an international scale. So you're going to have to, if that is the case, then you're going to have some alternative way of distributing demand. You can do that through trying to tax. Wait, let me just finish. You're going to have some alternative way of distributing. If the technology is becoming more and more responsible for production, one way in which you could do that, we can maybe get to a little bit of Mr. Gaddafi and so forth, is that if you have a private sector, rather than the assets that the private sector embody, be all owned by a tiny plutocratic class, the inherited money, so they can make collateral, they can make an investment, pays for itself, that they get richer and richer and richer as they sleep. They don't have to do anything. They just sleep, and they get richer. So instead of it all being concentrated, you should be building ownership of the private sector capital assets that are creating the wealth, a combine or something, into the masses, or Con Edison, who everybody uses the electricity, Con Edison as an entity, or others, you could reply, should be the owners of the capital base of the technology displacing labor built into the people who make up the consumer base for that, rather than just depending only upon them like serfs on a feudal estate. Everything's owned by the king or the lords, and the others are only going to do what they are told on a feudal estate, particularly in a world that's so we ought to have an alternative way of distributing income other than only jobs. But see, we should have ownership distributed. Mr. Gaddafi in the private sector, which he kept, was doing that. That might be one well reason beyond just kicking them out of wheelers. But in the private sector, if you had a business, it had to be owned by everybody in the business. You couldn't hire anybody. Couldn't pay wage. They had to own the asset. We don't bring that up at all from the progressive community because we're all caught up in how wonderful.
We also are.
Can you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, but we are as guilty in the progressive community as we are in the capitalist community of being short-sighted. In point of fact, this is not 1929. This is 2011.
Yes.
And the technology has brought about a potential for us to build a whole nother world that has not even been conceived of.
We started off talking about that. That's right. Well, that's right. That's the point.
When you analyze Katrina, it's more. Katrina was more than just a hurricane and some levees. Katrina was the failure of the American people who has the capacity to literally build something spectacular and do tremendous things through greed and arguing about who gets the money, who needs the money, who wants to buy a TV.
Doing a great job, Brownie. Remember him saying that?
When in point of fact, we have the capacity to build tremendous levees. I mean, we have the capacity to redesign our cities. We have the capacity to actually do great things. We have not reached a time where we don't need people working. Well, if that was the case, fine. But we have satellites in space. It is inexcusable that we are 43rd in the world of nations with infant mortality rate. It is inexcusable that our education system is a complete and total failure. It is inexcusable that Katrina wiped out so many people in New Orleans. When we have, it is inexcusable, inconceivable that our oceans are so polluted, that our air is so polluted. When we have the capacity to almost turn our circumstance into a utopia. Correct.
Thank you. Buckminster Fuller wrote a book, Utopia.
And we all argue about money.
That's right.
Who gets the money?
Well, because we've got economic paradigms and so forth, that the only way, I'm suggesting, yes, you're going to have to anchor to history. You have to anchor to history.
Correct.
Yeah, and people came along. You had 1,000 years after Rome of the feudal houses of the dynastic states where legitimate authority was vested in the dynastic states, the kings and the earls, the dukes, and then everybody else serfs on a feudal estate. Everybody accepted it. Then came the United States of America, came the steam engine, came the Industrial Revolution, came that, and that's still continuing. And they set up a system that they think is legitimate for all the ages, which is the one that most of the world has adopted off and on. They're still in China. They're still the basis of their political power is Karl Marx out of Germany. They're taking Karl Marx and everything, and so you're getting to that point. But the point being, as we started out talking about this, there is a latent potentiality, and on the one side, it's in our very lifetime. We did a thing with Isaac Asimov. We aired it just this week again, re-aired it from '86. He said this is the defining generation in a big time. This is the defining generation after 10,000. That's something to think about. We live in that kind of a time. The weapons became species lethal in terms of that extended technological capability of Homo sapien mental and processes about the year 1970, according to most all the modeling. At the same time, Bucky Fuller was charting this idea that what percentage of, how do you get a definition of terms of a have or have not? They worked it out with a lot of people. Design science decades 65, 75. They worked it out coming into the 20th century, and that includes knowledge. That includes knowing.
Right.
We're going to take a picture of the shock wave 13.8 billion years ago within a nanosecond of its occurrence. It's an incredible capability. We didn't know the genome. We didn't know neurotransmitters the way the brain worked 30 years ago in our lifetime. It's like some gestation coming to the end. The water's breaking. There's something new really coming. And at an existential level, it's a new thing that's emerging. And on one side, we got the ability to wipe the whole species out. Since about 1970, it remains. And they're reifying outdated institutions that have been holding for 230 years, thinking it has universality to it. Even, capable. On the other side, we have a capability of taking care of everybody and the ecology with good elegance of design and a proper structure of our institutions, political, economic, and so forth, that are called for by the future. Nietzsche said the future influences the present as much as the past. We don't have a future-looking capability, potential. Remember we said Homo sapien was contained within Australopithecine 4 million years ago? Our future is contained within this system now. And we're just reifying and pushing on the world, dropping drones on everybody all over the place, for crying out loud. The outdated institutional assumptions, and the intellectual community has not come up with an alternative. And I'm very deeply, existentially, significantly concerned that the intellectuals or the vision thing is not being able to find its way into the public airways in the established media, much less maybe it has to come up through public access or from someplace.
Because you got.
If you understand what I'm saying, do you think that's a reality?
At
an existential level?
I don't think we lack the vision. I think we lack the dynamism. I think we lack those individuals who are dynamic enough to fight for a better world. That is not to say shoot people in the head, like the other guy. But the mind is the most tremendous weapon ever conceived. And if you can get people to understand their potential, it opens up whole new doors. Those organizations, those corporations, those people who control the wealth and resources of this planet, they understand.
Very narrow group. Very narrow group.
But they understand what is at stake. And they make absolutely sure that they spend lots of time and lots of money through every medium you could think of to get into the minds and hearts of people, to bend them to their way of thinking. It's inexcusable that when you look at Asimov and Shakespeare and Bucky Fuller and Kelso. And you look at the time.
Kelso's another thing.
When you look at the time.
And Gaddafi's another thing.
And Gaddafi.
I think he's overlooked.
All of this great thinking happened before broadband. All of this great thinking happened at a time where you had to seek knowledge out by going to some dusty old library and reaching up and blowing cobwebs off of information. And getting it. Now we have the total information at our fingertips. We have the information of the entire planet at our fingertips, and we are like dumber than ever.
Well,
that is an aggressive act. That is not coincidental.
So do you think that's the result of the politicians, or is that the result of the politicians are limited? And we did say it has to be anchored to the history.
Right.
Galileo had a telescope that was able to prove we were not the center of the universe, and they put him in jail and hung him because it was so messing up people's identity about a geocentric world. They only let him off the hook about 12 years ago for messing up that. A lot of people have their identities wrapped up in religious systems, all kinds of things.
Mind control.
I think we should be easy on ourselves when we can, because we've had this self-reflective consciousness where we can answer the we can ask the big question: what is it all about?
Yeah, I
Unlike
think
a crocodile,
is harder on themselves than I am on myself, and because I can be bluntly honest about myself.
Okay.
You know, I can be bluntly honest about a lot of things. Correct.
That's
and
a
the point
big
and the point of
jump.
the point of fact, if the stakes weren't so high, if the stakes weren't so high, I probably wouldn't care. I'd just go home and play my piano, and y'all could blow the place up for all I care. But the stakes are extraordinary. And we have the potential to do so much. And we are so money grubbing, so ignorant, so self-centered, so self-absorbed that we hold back progress in the interim. We are so busy talking about, I need 32 Lamborghinis, that we would let people starve to death in the Sudan. We would let people over crap, And again, we have the capacity to build a utopian society. It's mind-blowing.
It is to be alive in that kind of a time. The Chinese say, spare us from living in interesting times, because it's a double-edged sword. And we are born into that time. It seems that we're in that. Then if you get down to the nitty-gritty, then we have a lot of institutions, let's say the United States of America, a lot of institutions that developed 10 minutes? Okay, good. That's good.
We've been going at it.
I hadn't timed it,
beautiful,
so he gave me the
beautiful,
timing because I had missed it. Let me get this going here. Okay, so we have that. So, and we've inherited a lot of institutions. Some of them are really, we inherited slavery, that was something. And stealing in the same old way that history is a nightmare of injustice that James Joyce had Daedalus say is the nature of history, from which we're trying to awaken, or attempting to awaken. And we're coming to that point. And so so we've got the Congress of the United States. We've got representative democracy. We have the idea of economics, supply and demand. We have Mr. Keynes, then we have Mr. Hayek, we have Van Mises, we have Schumpeter, on the other side, demand, or you had Mundell, and the supply side, supply to serve. What we need in terms of economics, we need an economic system. Yes, there are going to be people needed to work. There are going to be people needed to work. You're going to need people who are ready to work. We're going to not need so many people of the assembly line nature, where they had to stand 12 hours and turn a nut to make a car. And so we're going to need people who are able to think things through in a unique and creative way. And the system is set up authoritarian. It's authoritarian, where what they're teaching, really, one of the things they're teaching is to be compliant to an authority figure, so they'll fit in to corporate bureaucracy. Senior vice president says, jump, you jump. And you do it. And that's what they want. Compliant people will fit in to the old organization in order to get what they call a job, which will give them money. And then that money will make it possible for them to go out and buy things. So the real input to production, the labor theory of value, which has informed so much of the progressive community, how important labor is. So you can get a minimum wage, you can get a better wage, a living wage, all of this has been applicable. But the trend of history is for capital instruments. You get an algorithm that can do what 500,000 people had to do, Lily Tomlin, connecting people up, and you don't have to have people doing, you don't have to have them enslaved to the kind of things they did. But they don't have an alternative way of distributing income to everybody outside of their having a job.
Well, see, jobs and income is not the real challenge.
No, but when they say jobs, they mean income. People need to have buying power to clear the market.
That's a diversion.
How else can we get money to people outside of having a job? You can do a taxing
Money is not the issue. Well, money is not the issue.
Okay, you don't think so?
No, we have made money the issue. In point of fact, knowledge is the issue. Capacity is the issue. I mean,
Okay.
they have us, we need money to have some place to live. We need money to eat. We need money to get clean drinking water and get back and forth to be
Those are
clean.
all pretty big issues in the
We
minds
don't
of
need
people
money,
who don't have
We don't
it.
need money to get a Mercedes-Benz.
Well, no,
that's
well,
a want. That's a desire,
Well,
not a necessity.
Well, we're talking about necessity. They say, Marx said, from each according to their ability, each according to their need. Need is a thing, but you're going to have a private
what does
sector.
the world need?
The world
needs us to be far and far more astute. They have just gone to war against a telescope, Harold. A telescope.
What are you talking
An
about?
instrument of knowledge.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
An instrument, a
well,
learning instrument. They have attacked the school system.
Yeah, yeah.
Instruments of learning.
Yeah, right.
We need to expand our capacity in the 21st century. Again, opportunity is out there. We have, as you have said 1,000 times, we have the capacity now to destroy the entire planet.
That should be said every day on
Correct.
the news.
But
or
we
something.
also have the potential
To liberate it.
Not just liberate it, to make it utopian.
Yeah, okay. How about we can either...
So we can get with this or we can get with that.
We are at the point where we could annihilate or we could liberate the human society within an ecological order, and we don't have...
We can go Star Trek on steroids.
Well, Star Trek is going out into science fiction, which people do and everything like that, but it's coming down to where it's going to have to come into the halls of government, strategic thinking, and it does come down, ultimately, they used to call it political economy. The economics and the politics are joined at the hip. And the stumbling block, at least from these people on the right, supply side, they got it all figured out. Just leave it all to the bankers. They set up private sector, all the swaps and derivatives to deal with risk. And I would put a thing out for Gaddafi. We're going to talk some with Coley. She's been over there and everything like that. But he had it, the government, they had a lot of money and they distributed it, as you can do through the government if you don't have an overweening attack upon the idea of government being able to do anything good. And they did. They got a high standard of living there and everything like that. Of course. Most important thing, everywhere you went in that country, when you had it, you could have a private sector. Soviets overthrew private sector. They thought it was an evil institution. You need a private sector. But the private sector's got to be controlled. It can't be let loose. And what they want to do is link it to any thoughts of control and all the swaps and derivative things. That's all dealing with the various levels of risk, and they treat the whole world economy as though it's a great big venture, risky crapshoot. Yeah, that's what they did. And all of those swaps and derivatives, which are a way of dealing with risk, currency fluctuation, all that, and it's legitimate. It should be in the government, and it should be linked to the federal release, and it should be a government thing, and it should be where the things that are really needed and are solid, housing, food, these kind of, that should be at one level, and then there should be a little bit left over for risk and for venture. It's not all venture. It wasn't even and risk. They're going to make it all. It was a loaded game, and it's not even the swaps and derivatives, although they. Well, it's all in the private sector. But what they did was it should be in the private. That role. I hope Miss Warren wins in Massachusetts. Correct. She wants to win. But what they did was insidious because not only did they rig the game, and they didn't even put the money back in the game because most of the money came in fees for doing this stuff. But they literally did this stuff all across the planet. That's right. And they got one or two companies to ensure, and they levered the money 40 times to one, 35 to one, all over the planet. And then they had one or two insurance agencies to say, "I got it," when they didn't have a dime. So AIG insured the whole planet. In point of fact, private sector, they only had about a 4 or 5% default rate. A 5% default rate should not bankrupt the whole damn planet. Yeah, well, they let it go that way. So how do we deal with that? You got to deal with different levels. The point being is, you're not going to be able to. You need simulfinancing. They have to have a thing where the capital instruments, there's capital formation and all of that done in a way. You need a nun with a ruler to smack their hands every time those nuns, and a couple of Jesuits in the background to keep the order, like sheriffs. No, but then you need to have simulfinancing so that the capital is formed in a way through. The capitalist system is going to, in its own interest, is going to have to be hoisted on its own petard.
Correct.
Like Shakespeare.
Correct.
And that means
Correct.
you're going to say private property.
Correct.
It's a wonderful thing.
Correct.
How come we leave private property ownership to only the already rich? The
Because
rich
the
are getting
government
richer.
works for them
No,
instead of
because
they working for the government.
Because the left or the progressives are thinking private property